On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. And I just wanted to just refresh everybody's memory with regards to a lot of the different things that we have going on here with the 5280 Life Sciences Consulting Company. I primarily focus in on companies that are looking to increase their capacity and really deal with the key problems of today. I primarily help companies in strategy, people, process, and technology. And if you have any current needs, please feel free to reach out. And so with that, let me bring in my guest for today. My guest is Dr. Kate Broderick. Dr. Broderick has more than 20 years of experience in the life science industry as a recognized vaccine expert. She has a broad background in device and product development in DNA, therapeutic, and drug delivery fields. And so with that, welcome, Kate.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining me. And I really appreciate, having somebody that focuses in on vaccines because, obviously near and dear to a lot of us is, the vaccines that we all receive. And so it sounds like a good topic for us to discuss today.
That's great. Although some people get frustrated because we've talked about it so much over the last 4 years, but yeah, it's my pleasure to talk about that today.
Very good. So what led you in your career to want to really focus in on vaccines? What sort of led you to this point in your career?
I don't know if it's a sort of a linear path, Dawn, but certainly, from a very early age, very interested in science and really, even as a child thinking about unmet medical needs and, why there was vaccines for some things, why there was medicines for some things, and some things just really had no opportunities out there. And so I did my PhD back, you might have noticed I'm not American by birth. I was born in Scotland. So did my grad school over in Scotland using animals as a model for human diseases, essentially. And then had the opportunity to come to the States, to UCSD, to do my postdoc, sort of bringing that concept a little bit closer to the clinic. And then, from that training, decided that really my passion was, on the really the interface between science and clinical application. And so I was really lucky to be able to kind of follow that through my career and really kind of ended up just not by chance, but I guess by great fortune and really specializing in infectious diseases. And that took me, through a lot of vaccine development campaigns as part of my career, and now kind of helping other developers with their own vaccine development here at Maravai. So it's been a amazing, wonderful journey.
Yeah, and then you've spent over 20 years in the industry, notably in DNA therapeutics and drug delivery fields. What motivated you really to focus in on this area?
Yeah, it's DNA is always just such and RNA, frankly, are both such fundamental, they're elements of the central dogma, right? You can't get any more sort of basic than that. And so the ability to use those almost primordial molecules to harness that power to change kind of the face of medicine today, it's just such a exciting and powerful experience. And I think as many of us don't love to reflect too much on this, we would be in a very difficult position today were it not for the breakthrough of the RNA vaccines during COVID, of course. And so really just to me, that just underscored the power of the technology. And I think, looking forward into the future, the potential of both those molecules, DNA and RNA, to really change the paradigm of cancer treatment, for instance, is truly a reality. And, I think in 5 years, 10 years, we'll see a plethora of new vaccines, therapies, treatments that are going to utilize these technologies in a way that wasn't even imaginable 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've said this before in other episodes. I feel like this point in terms of the science is a really interesting one because we know a lot, but we still have so much more to learn. There's a lot that
Yep.
we can do, but there's still much, still so much more to do. and it just feels like we're right in the middle of something really big. And so it's a great place to be.
Yeah, I mean, very recently, Dawn, I was doing another interview, and the interviewer asked me, but RNA, it just works for COVID, right? And it's interesting to me that that's kind of that's a point of view, but actually that was just the tip of the iceberg. And so, to your point, we are entering into such a transformative time era for next generation medicines, and that's just so incredibly exciting.
Yeah, my understanding is that because of all of the knowledge that we had from all of the other vaccines that were created for and the research that was done in SARS and Ebola and things like that, that was the reason why we were able to accelerate a lot of the research even that we were able to do in COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Those of us who had sort of spent much of our careers in the infectious disease vaccine space, I think we all expected a global pandemic was inevitable. But, my money was definitely on a flu variant coming and kind of sweeping through the world. That obviously wasn't the case. It turned out to be a coronavirus, and I don't know that anybody necessarily saw that coming. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we had the SARS outbreak, we had the MERS outbreak. And so many of us had spent a lot of time working on those very similar but distinct viruses. And so certainly the work that was done on MERS allowed us to already kind of have jump-started that effort, but in the sense of we knew what antigen worked well for a MERS vaccine, which was very similar to COVID. And so that really helped us kind of leapfrog over those initial kind of stages of discovery research and kind of home in on that spike protein that, ended up being absolutely critical to the vaccine effort.
Very good. So if I take a look at your entire career history, you've been on both the research side as well as the leadership side of organizations. What have you brought to your current role that you feel like you kind of learned along the way that is really helping you in your current role at Maravai?
Yeah, I was extremely fortunate, I think, when I left academics to join what at the time was a little bit like a startup entity. It was a company called Inovio Pharmaceuticals that specializes in DNA vaccines and therapeutics. And at the time, it was very small. And so joining, even though I joined as a scientist, I was able to really take on a number of different roles and responsibilities, very, very divergent to, what my educational training had been. So I got exposed to clinical development, to the finance side, you name it, as anyone who's worked in a sort of small biotech or a startup knows, the need to wear many hats. And I feel extremely fortunate for that opportunity because that really pushed me out of my comfort zone, which was discovery research, and exposed me to so many other facets, which in my role today, and I'm Chief Innovation Officer here at Maravai, and I know that's kind of an unusual title, so I guess maybe translated, that's a little bit, people are maybe more familiar with the Chief Scientific Officer, but I think that's this with a sprinkle of technology in there too. So those past experiences, I think, have led me to still have that inquisitive nature of a research scientist, pushing those blue sky thoughts, but be able to kind of really see how that fits into the bigger product development pathway, how that fits into corporate strategy, how that fits into the budgets for the year or for the 5-year development plan. So I think it's kind of having grown up, I think, in an environment which challenged me and allowed me to really reach out and develop different areas, has really allowed me to move into a position here where it's really kind of thinking about the field in general and what areas developers are needing, what challenges they're having, and then allowing the amazing R&D scientists here under the Maravai umbrella to really take those ideas, formulate them, and then have the opportunity to turn those into products.
Do you ever find that as a leader who, initially focused on the research side, that you oftentimes have to kind of, tell yourself to pull back a little bit, that you're not supposed to necessarily step, so far into everything that everybody's doing? Or do you just find that because of it, you can relate better to the things that the scientists are currently working on?
That's a great question. And right, for innovation to truly be successful, I do think you need to have that comfort zone, that ability to have blue sky thinking. And that, that's a very academic mindset, right? Is, oh, I've got this problem, what are the 100 possible ways of solving it, and then spending 3 or 4 years analyzing that. Now, clearly that doesn't fit into a corporate structure perfectly because of so I like to feel that from a leadership standpoint, I want to create an environment where the scientists feel comfortable to have those innovative thoughts, because really that's where the value lies, right? Is harvesting those ideas, but make it very clear within the vision of the company, very clear what are the areas that we are able to challenge, because you have to realize you're not going to be an expert at everything, and where do we have the expertise that we can truly make a difference, and then really think very clearly about then as an idea, can we solve it? Should we solve it? Do our clients need it solved? And then come up with a structured timeline so that the scientists are very clear about how to move the project forward in an efficient way. But it's certainly no way to stifle the innovation, which would be kind of contrary to the whole point, I guess.
Yeah, it's so important. I feel like there's this gentle sort of balance that has to happen between especially a leader that's sort of walked in the shoes of the people that you're leading, right? That you have to sort of let people do things within limits, and then let them make mistakes on their own, so they'll learn on their own. But at the same time, there's oftentimes things that you come with that you could say, hey, look, we tried this a few times and this is not worth spending a lot of time on either. So yeah.
And that is fundamental to, I think, a successful leader, Don, right? Is somebody who has the capability of saying, right, now's the time to stop. And that cannot be popular, because people get very attached to, and quite rightly so. I think you should feel passionate about the research you do. But I do think that making a decision to say, we've given this a good try, it's not working out, let's move on to something else. I think that's really key to successfully moving innovation forward, because otherwise you can kind of get mired down, and by the time you've worked out all the intricacies, the field has passed you by.
Right. Yeah. And important, especially in this competitive marketplace as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on your role as Chief Innovation Officer and how you contribute to the company's mission?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think having a Chief Innovation Officer really does speak highly of the importance that Maravai and our CEO and the leadership team places on innovation. I think historically, Maravai, TriLink, Cygnus, many of our business unit companies that are under the Maravai umbrella have really been standouts in their field. But that's not stationary, right? That changes, and certainly as an example in the mRNA field, where it used to be that TriLink was making RNA, are one of the very few people making RNA 20 years ago. That's now not the case anymore. And so it's not a static position. It's certainly not something you want to take for granted. And so to ensure that you're constantly pushing the bounds of the innovation, ensuring that your technology is not just keeping pace with the field, Dawn, to be honest, really kind of proactively thinking about what the field needs in advance is so key. And the only way you'll do that is through innovation and allowing your scientists to have innovative ideas, thoughts, but do it, as you just said, in a structured environment where it's very clear what the goals are.
Yeah, and having that pipeline is so important and critical for many companies, and sort of thinking long term about where does this play, how does it fit, what is the exact fit, and having somebody strategically think about that is where I see your role being a bit different than somebody that's just sort of guiding the current development. So as I hear what you're describing, is that your role is much more focused on the overall portfolio and the strategic way that plays into where Maravai is going, versus somebody who's just entirely thinking about one thing and how do we move that one element down the field.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, Dawn. And, really in my position, because obviously the needs of our clients, of the developers, are absolutely critical to our future. So having that interface with the commercial organization, what are our clients asking for? What are their needs? What challenges are we hearing? And then how do I distill that message back into our R&D pipeline so that we are proactively kind of thinking of solutions in advance? What are we hearing at conferences that is maybe now, years from the clinic? That's fine. But should we be acting on that now so that we have a position when these things enter the clinic, or when they enter, later phase preclinical testing?
So critical for, I think, a lot of organizations that have, beyond one technology, one molecule, and one business that they're thinking about, to have somebody like yourself, playing in that role. Can you tell us a little bit more about Maravai and some of the groundbreaking projects or technologies that you're currently working on that are public?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, let me kind of explain the corporate structure, because I certainly have been asked a few times. So Maravai is the parent corporate level. So you could kind of imagine it as a holding company. And underneath it, we have 4 separate business units. The one that perhaps people might be most familiar with is TriLink, and that specializes primarily on the nucleic acid side of things. Then we have Cygnus, who is a world leader on host cell proteins, so impurity testing. Then we have Glen Research, who supplies reagents to the oligo world. And then last but not least, in our latest addition to the family, is Alphazymes, based out in Florida, is an enzyme manufacturing company. And so what we've tried to do through our business model and through the model, of course, of M&A, is bring synergistic companies together, so that we can exist within kind of a holistic environment where we are working together separately, but also and collaboratively together. So you can imagine that the work of Alphazyme really clearly supports the work that's going on in TriLink. There's a lot of vertical integration there, and so on and so forth. So TriLink, the one that perhaps most people are familiar with, is most famous. I think our flagship technology that people are most familiar with is the clean cap molecule. So that's the cap that goes on the front of an mRNA molecule. And you might not have heard of us, but you might actually have one of our products inside of you because we were the cap on the Pfizer BioNTech COVID vaccine. So we were incredibly proud and honoured to be part of the mission in that vaccine development in partnership with Pfizer. So that's probably our flagship molecule. And as part of that effort, we believe that capping is a critical part of mRNA development. And as I kind of mentioned early on, Dawn, mRNA isn't just about COVID by any means. There's huge based vaccines for flu, for instance, and many other infectious disease molecules, but also many oncology targets. Obviously, there's been some amazing data, clinical data recently for personalized cancer vaccines combined with immunotherapies, and those look incredible and I think will really change the paradigm. But also mRNA can be used to encode monoclonal antibodies. mRNA can be used as part of CRISPR technology. mRNA can be used as a protein replacement therapy. So the opportunities for use of mRNA are just incredibly expansive. And so to kind of link that back to what do we do at Maravai, well, we believe that each of those indications might have different needs for an mRNA for a cancer vaccine might have a different need than an mRNA for a protein replacement for cystic fibrosis, for instance. And so we want to work with developers to offer them those reagents so that they can come up with a bespoke product that works even better than it did conceptually. So that's what we do at TriLink. Cygnus is in the biomanufacturing world, looking at process impurities and really have our absolute gold standards. And you don't just need to take my word for that. The fact that their kits are used in 23 out of the 23 approved cell and gene therapy products. So that's something we're incredibly proud of. And they're always pushing the innovation. So what will the field need next? What will, what kits should we develop next to support developers in that field? And so it's just an incredibly exciting team, group of people to be part of, and to have the opportunity personally to oversee innovation and really be pulling on the expertise at all of those different levels is a really exciting opportunity, and it's a great group of people to work with.
So critical overall. And the portfolio, I would imagine, from your perspective as well, is just a lot to have to keep in mind, but also, sort of watching the industry of all of those aspects is not a small task either, I guess is the way I would summarize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, although there are definitely synergies across the different business units, they're also quite diverse too. And so we really rely on the expertise within each of those business units really to flag up when, there's an element that we need to be educated on, for instance. And so we have a lot of kind of cross educational purposes. And I think that's a really great way to build culture so that, certainly as scientists, we are learning in each of the 4 different areas as much as we have our expertise in one particular unit.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something that you just said a little bit ago whenever you mentioned the relationship that you had with Pfizer sort of in the COVID vaccine development. When you collaborate with academic institutions or corporate partners, how does that partnership come about, and sort of how does the relationship normally form?
Yes, great question. And that's actually, interestingly, Dawn, one of the mandates of the innovation team here at Maravai is to really look at fostering those relationships. And just as an example, one is, you give a talk at a conference and you end up by saying, we're really interested in collaborating with anybody working in this field. And that usually stems, of course, as you can imagine, a lot of interest, once you come down from the podium. But really what we as an entity understand that, we have a research team, but it's not endless. It's, a finite number of people with to do research. And so really it's so incredibly important for us to reach out to entities that maybe our technology or maybe not at all, and highlight where we believe we could together, because clearly with all the will in the world, we couldn't take our products and test them for a CRISPR application and a vaccine application and a cell and gene therapy application. It's just it's not scalable. So the way that we believe, the most efficient way that we believe, is to do that through collaborative work. From an academic standpoint, that allows people to publish, which of course is so fundamental in science, is the ability to get word out there so that people can learn together. And that's really been very, very fruitful for us, whether that's been academic collaborations or industrial collaborations. I think it's sort of bringing those two fields of expertise. On an industrial side, they might have a disease indication in mind and can utilize our technology, and then there's synergy there. Academic, it might be a more mechanistic question, but there's still synergy there. And so it's building those relationships through the science, I think, and seeing that really it's worthwhile for both sides. And it's been incredibly fruitful and really a great experience for us, to work in those areas. And we just have learned things that we just never had the possibility to do in-house, just because we don't have those expertise.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I mean, if I were talking to one of the partners, right, there's probably that same level of relationship. At least I feel that whenever I work with somebody on, any sort of development, technology, that there's even whenever you're working with big pharma or a large academic institution, I feel like those collaborations are very much a two-way street. And so it's, there's a definite benefit felt on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. And, giving big pharma as an example, and I don't mean this in any negative connotation way, but, they don't always have the bandwidth for innovation in all specific areas. Their focus is perhaps very clinical in nature. And so I think what Maravai brings to the table is, 25 plus 30 years of expertise of innovating in very specific kind of surgical areas, that then big pharma or an academic collaboration can kind of pull on those specific expertise that they might not have had the opportunity to build in-house.
Absolutely. What is the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Network. It's something, some people absolutely love networking, and it comes very easily. And for some people, it's, keeps them up at night. But, as I think kind of back on my own career experience, it's really been that's really helped propelled me to where I am today. And, I would go as far as to say, friendships that kind of came up through, attending conferences together and sharing a glass of wine have really been transformative, because I think you kind of, once you build that level of trust, it might be 10 years later or whatever, but you can call up and say, hey, are you guys working on this? Would you want to, write a grant together or write a publication together? And that has, when I think back about successes in my own career, I could think of multiple examples where, that kind of historical network that I had to fall back on was absolutely transformative.
Absolutely. So there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Working with amazing people.
Yeah, it's the one thing that I say, all the time is that, you get to work around, at least in this field, especially, you get to work around all these brilliant people that know how to do things that at least I have no clue exactly how to do. And so it's for me, a bit like, like getting to work with a bunch of, just very talented individuals is something that is the definite driver as well. Yeah. What concerns you?
Vaccine hesitancy, misinformation on social media, to be in all seriousness, Don, obviously during the pandemic, it was absolutely rife, but even post-pandemic, we're seeing, some attempts to ban mRNA vaccine delivery in certain states and areas. And that frightens me. I mean, genuinely frightens me. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much appreciation for science. I truly felt, the public felt that need, that passion, and that deteriorated because of really malicious lies, and I don't see that fading, and that really concerns me.
Yeah, and I see all sorts of levels of that concern, right? Everything from the making up false stories that just don't tie at all to anything that would relate to science, all the way through to hey, I've had a bad experience, and because of that bad experience, I don't want to go on and have be vaccinated any longer. And it is an interesting sort of dichotomy, because it's almost like you got to knock down one thing at a time. It's not any one thing overall, but the one thing that I've heard consistently on this show from people that are sort of in your space that focus in on infectious diseases, and they just say, look, the next pandemic really could happen anytime. And so there is an expectation that what we saw with COVID isn't the last time that this will happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's inevitable, and it may well happen in our lifetime. And I know people don't want to hear that, but I think that's absolutely true. And just, we have to learn lessons from what we just lived through. And if the one lesson I could underscore is we need to communicate better.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question, what excites you?
The future of nucleic acid medicines. I know you might say I'm a little biased, but gosh, it's incredible, the power of these molecules. And I truly believe that in 5-10 years' time, we will change the way we treat certain cancers. Certain diseases will have vaccines that haven't had any opportunity to be immunized against. I absolutely think that is a reality.
Well, Kate Broderick, thank you so much for coming on the Life Science Success podcast and for telling us about Maravai Life Sciences and everything that you're working on surrounding vaccines and DNA technologies.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.